Baruch Hashem, Boker Tov. Today's daf yomi is Avodah Zarah daf Ayin Aleph, Avodah Zarah 71. We're going to start at the Mishnah on the bottom of Ayin Amabez, the bottom of 70b. Says that today's daf is dedicated for a shmir for the Chayalim. That's all for the Shvuyim. Yeshua for Am Yisrael on the Seis Torah. The Mishnah tells us on the bottom of 70b, Boeshet Shenichnas Eir. What the Boeshet is an army. Rashi says that they're always looking and investigating. So they come into a city, Bishas Shalom, if it's a time of peace, and Chavios Pesuchos Asuros, if there's open barrels, they'll be prohibited because we assume that this army did a Yayin Nesach on them, they did a Nisuch, they did a libation by doing the Shilchuch, by agitating the wine. So if they're open barrels, it's prohibited, but it's tumos, but if they're closed barrels, mutaros, we assume they didn't mess with the closed barrels. But if we find the closed barrels were open, then obviously they'll be prohibited. But b'shas milchama, but if it's a time of war, elu ve'elu mutaros, then we're going to say that both the open and the closed barrels will be permitted if they don't have time in a war to do their libation. Obviously, the commentaries point out that if it was a closed barrel and now it's open, then they had time for it, and then it would be prohibited. Gemara asked the question from a brisa, which also appears in Ksuvos. We learned from a Mishnah in Ksuvos, the Raminhi ir shekavshua karkom. Let's say there was a city that was conquered by Karkom. Basically, it's a sieging army surrounds a city like a circle. Karkom. All the women who are married to Kohanim, Rahman al are going to be prohibited because a woman who's married to a Kohen, she's not allowed to return to him if she was assaulted against her will. So we say that in this circumstance, we assume that these soldiers violated these women. And so they're all going to be disqualified to return to the Kohen, to return to their husbands. And we see from here that even though it's a time of war, the women, they will have time to do this tremendous sin. So the Gemara says, Amar of Mari, yeah, they don't have time to do the libation, but they do have time to do the Be'ilah. And the reason is that Rashi says the Yetzer Nisach Otakafuhu, when it comes to the inclination to do the libation, that they can overwhelm, but then they'll be involved with the war. When it comes to the Yetzer Hara for Rayos, that they're going to be overwhelmed by the temptation to sin, and that they won't be able to hold back. But we see from here that a person can say sometimes, oh, I have no time for this, but then they have time for something else. That's a story of our life, that we have to prioritize the proper things to use our time with. Says the Mishnah, Ha'omnin Shal Yisrael. So let's say you have the Umnin, a Jewish worker, Sheshalach Lahem Ovid Kochavim, Chavishal Yayin, Nesach, Bischaran. You have a Jewish worker, and the idolater wants to pay the Jew with a barrel of wine as a payment. So we're going to say, and obviously the Jew doesn't want a barrel of wine. So the idolater is trying to pay him with this barrel of wine. Mutar lo marlo. So the Jew can say to the idolater, he could say, no, take this back. I want cash. He said he can basically refuse to accept this yayin nesach and say that just give me money. But once the barrel of wine came into the domain of the Jew, then it's going to be usher. Then it's prohibited because at that point the Jew has acquired it, and then then it'd be like he's selling or benefiting from yayin nesach, and then it'd be prohibited. So Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav, mutar adam omar lo v'kochavim seif ha'feis alai minas hamelech. A person is allowed to say to the idolater, go and basically pay, take care of my taxes. Rashi says the Manasseh Melchos, the Arnona, which is even the modern Hebrew word for taxes, they used to put on their crops, they had to pay a tenth, and this Jew has to give to the king a certain amount of wine. So he's allowed to say to the idolater, you do it for me, even though this idolater is giving yayin nesach, and therefore the Jew is giving him money. So basically, he's benefiting from the yayin nesach. It's not that. Why? Because since the idolater could have paid money to the king when he gives him yayin nesach, he's not acting as the agent of the Jew. He's acting on his own behalf. So in that case, it's going to be permitted. But we have a contradictory brisa. We learned in the brisa. You can't say to an idolater, "You go in my place to pay the governor," or she says, basically, you can't say, "You go in my place to pay the guy who's in charge of collecting the wine." You can't do that. So how come in this case he's allowed to? So that was the contradiction that was asked to Rav. So Rav responds, Rav responds, Rav would say back to you, Rav, all tachtai otzer kamas, you think that my case is the same as going my place to the otzer? That's not the same case. He could say, save me from the otzer. That's not an expression of shlichus, of being in my place. If he says, be in my place, then he's basically acting as your agent when he gives the ayin nesach. But if he just says, save me, then he says, however way you want to do it. If you want to do it with the ayin nesach, that's your choice. I'd be very happy if you gave cash instead. So now, I'm to the next Mishnah. And this next Mishnah is going to take us into the world of kinyanim. Kinyan is the way of an item changes possession of ownership, and it's the moment of formal transaction. Let's say a person decides to sell his wine to an idolater. Pasak, let's say they agreed upon a price, but the idolater has not yet measured it out. Then damav mutarin. Then we're going to say that the Jew can get the money from the idolater if they agreed upon a price, but the idolater has not yet measured it out. And the Gemara is going to explain, because what we're talking about here is the case of how has the idolater acquired it? By doing what's called meshicha, by pulling it toward him. And so therefore, when he measures it out, he's actually pulled it toward him, and the idolater has acquired it. And so and then the money that the Jew has with the idolater is not going to be what's transference of ownership, because that money is basically a loan that the Jew has given to the idolater. And so therefore, so basically, if he has agreed upon the price, then we're going to say, then it's okay. Then koneh. So I'm going to just read this Rashi. Mefarish b'Gemara Taima. Now, what's the reason in the Gemara that if you sell the wine to the idolater and you agreed upon the price before the idolater took it and measured it out, then it's going to be permitted. And Rashi says, Iki demukila. And there are some who explain that what we're talking about here is the morning Jeff, Baruch Hashem, or the Mishnah on 71a. Now we're talking about here is Meshicha ba'ol be'kochavim kana. This goes according to the position. It says the idolater has acquired it only by pulling it towards him. And so therefore, when he measures it, he's going to have acquired it immediately. Because he already has the money with the Jew. The Jew already has his money with him. And so therefore, by the time he pulls it, he's acquired it, but he hasn't actually done the yayin nesach until he touches it. So that's okay. But we're on the second mission on 71a. But madad achlo pasak dama. But let's say he pulls it toward him, and he has not yet agreed upon a price. Then we're going to say it's asurin. Then it's idolater. Then it's going to be prohibited. Why? Because according to this approach, we're going to say, hold on one second. I just want to see one second what it says here. Hold 1 second. So, according to this approach, Rashi says, Madad Achla Pasach, but let's say he measured out before he agreed upon a price, it's going to be prohibited. That in this case, the idolater has not acquired it by pulling it towards him. The Kivan the Pasak Damab, since they didn't agree upon a price, therefore he doesn't have agreement to acquire it. When he touched it, have a yayin Nesach to Israel. He's touching the yayin of the Jew because they have not agreed upon a price, and even though he pulled it toward him, he has not acquired it. The Ika de Mukila, and some want to say Rashi says that we're talking about a case, and this we'll see in the Gemara. The second answer, that the idolater paid the money to the Jew first, because there's going to be a dispute in the Gemara as we'll get to now whether the idolater can acquire it by just pulling it. Is that a method of acquisition? Is that what's called a kinyan? So we're going to see this dispute here between Maimar and Rav Ashi, and only at the very end of this dispute are they going to bring in our Mishnah as a proof. So Amar Maimar said the Chedesh, Meshicha ba'ove kochavim kona. He says that if the idolater pulls it towards him, then he has acquired it. Meshicha, by pulling it towards you, the idolater has acquired it. So even though the idolater has not given the money to the Jew, just pulling it towards him has acquired it. And so too, whenever we say the idolater acquires it that way, so too the Jew. So therefore, Amemar says this idea that the idolater pulls it, even though no money has been transferred, you've acquired it. And Teida, I'll prove it to you. Dahani parsai, mishadre parshtanai ladadi, because we know these Persians would send gifts to each other. Then you send them a gift, and they say it's now irreversible gift. So this proves that the idolater acquires it. Rav Ashi says no. Rashi argues with Meimer. He says no, Mashiach does not acquire by an idolater. The only reason why it's not reversible is not because technically it's irreversible because it's an acquisition, but the Rambas Ruchu the Nikitalu. But it's just that the Persians, they're very they have a lot of arrogance, and they say, once I give it, I'm not getting it back. And basically, they're going to be of the position that that they're not going to go back on it only because of their honor. So there's a dispute here whether or not Mashiach is koneh by an idolater. Amemar says yes. Rav Ashi says no. So the Gemara says, Rav Ashi. So Amar Rav Ashi Mina Rav Ashi says, how can I prove to you that Mashiach does not acquire by an idolater? I'll give you a proof from what Rav used to say to those wine salesmen. He used to sell them, and he said, this is how you're supposed to sell the wine to the idolaters. When you bring them the wine, first take money from them, first get their money, and then give it to them. Don't let them first bring it into their possession, but first get their money and then give it to them. So we see from here, why did he say to do it like that? And he says, let's say they don't even have their money with them. Uzifunu, first give them some cash, give them some cash as a loan, and then take it. Meaning, say, first get their money before they pull it. Because if they pulled it before you got the money, then they've acquired the yayin nesach, and then they've acquired the wine and they made it yayin nesach. That's a big problem. So we'll see as Rav Ashi explains it. It says, so that it should be a loan for them. Because if you don't do this, if you don't get the money from them, then when they're going to make it into yayin nesach, it's still yours because you didn't get money from them. So we see that they're pulling it to them is not acquiring it. What's acquiring it is the money. And if you would, after they pull it into their property and touch it, then they give you the money. Well, then it's already become yayin nesach before the property has transferred. So we see from here, and if it's like a Meimer says that just pulling is acquired it on the top of 71b, And it wasn't he pulled it when he acquired it, and it wasn't yayin nesach until he touched it. So from the fact that he says first pay for it, that proves that the payment is what transfers it, not the Mashiach. So this is how Rav Ashi challenges a Meimer from this case of how Rav would give instructions, or on top of 71b. So the Gemara says, no, that's not a proof. Yeah, if they would be if the Jew would be measuring it out and pouring it into what's going on here is he wasn't pouring it into the possession of the idolater. In this case, the problem was that Jew was pouring it into his own jugs. The kakal v'rami l'mani the Yisrael, and so therefore the idolater never acquired it, and then he touched it. He made a yayin nesach hachinami. But no, what is the case where? Why was Rav warning about them? The kakal v'rami l'mani the ovid kochavim. Rav was warning about it, where basically the Jew was measuring and pouring the wine into the utensil of the guy. And so therefore, since he was pouring it into the utensil of the guy, and therefore there was already wine in it. And so therefore, before he pulled it into his possession, he acquired it right away. So that's why he says, before he even pulls it, you have to pay for it. Otherwise, by the time he does the kinyan, it's already yayin nesach, and it's a problem. So that was the issue. He says, if you had been pouring into the utensil of a Jew, then there would be no problem, says Meimer, because he hasn't acquired it. It's a problem where he pours into the utensil of a guy, and it's already become yayin nesach before he acquires it, because there's an existing wine in there. So the Gemara says, but still, that should still be. That doesn't work, that answer. Why? Still, the second it came into the airspace of the utensil, the guy should have acquired it, and so therefore it was already his, and so he's paying for you for the wine that he got before it became yayin nesach. Why does he have to pay in advance? So the Gemara says, and so the Gemara says, whereas when it came into the airspace, he's acquired it, and yayin nesach ohavi, and it still didn't become yayin nesach until it reaches the bottom of the utensil, and so therefore we would see from here that it wouldn't be a problem, unless we want to say Shema Mina Nitzu Chibur, unless you want to say something which is a Shas debate, that even when it's at the top of the utensil, it's connected to the bottom through a steady stream that's pouring in. And so then that would answer the discussion whether or not if you pour something onto something else, the top is considered connected to the bottom. And so from the fact that you want to say that he's acquired it, he would have acquired it from the second it came into his possession, then that could answer the question that Nitzuk is Chibur. So the Gemara says, no, that's not what we're talking about. Whoa. He did not get if the idolater was holding the utensil in his hand, then he would have acquired it right away. But that and that's why you would have to give the if the idolater had been holding in his hand, then we could prove from here that Nitzuk is Chibur. But that's not what's going on here. That's not the circumstance where Rav told him to pay in advance. The Manachara was on the ground. And so since it was on the ground and the idolater was not holding it, so he hasn't acquired it. And so therefore it became yayin nesach before he acquired it. So the Gemara says, "V'tikning like Caleb." Well, why hasn't he not acquired it? His utensil would have acquired it. So maybe we learn from here a different discussion. That's a topic for Shas. Whether or not you bring your utensil into the purchaser brings the utensil into the domain of the seller. So learn from here that he hasn't acquired it yet. So Shmas Mina, maybe learn from here that if the purchaser brings his utensil in the domain of the seller, he hasn't acquired it. That's why the idolater has not acquired the wine when it becomes Yain Nesach, and that's why Rav says he has to pay in advance. The Gemara says no. Whoa, no, we could say that the purchaser has acquired it. What we're talking about here is the reason he would acquire it if it came into his utensil. But here it became Yain Nesach before it got into the utensil. Why? You go into Ika Keves Yain Apumeit Kuzanta. No, we're talking about a case here where there was some of the wine of the idolater on the lid of the lip of the utensil. The Kama Insachai. That even before it came into the utensil, it became Yain Nesach from the wine on the top. And we'd have to say it wasn't nullified. Ukaman. So this must be, so Rav must be ruling the Lokarash Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. So Rav's ruling, who says that the wine that got mixed in with the Yayin Nesach is prohibited, Rav must be ruling not like Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. The Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, Rabbi Shimon Gamliel would still say you're allowed to sell it under those circumstances, just deducting the value of the Yayin Nesach. So you want to say that Rav does not hold like Rabbi Shimon Gamliel? So the Gemara says, no, that's not necessarily the case. Midu Taima El Rav. No, since we're just trying to explain Rav's position, because he's the one who gave this ruling, Rav says the laws like Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, that's only chavis b'chavis of a whole yayin b'yayin. That's only a case where you can deduct the value of the Yayin Nesach and still accept all the money for the rest of the wine. That's only where it's barrels of wine. But if it's one barrel of wine and all the wine is mixed in, Rav wouldn't allow it. He would allow it if there's 20 barrels and one of the barrels was Yayin Nesach. Then he would say take the money for 19 barrels. But in case where it's all mixed in, he wouldn't allow it. Anyway, we have not yet proved who's correct in this dispute between Rav and between Amemar and Rav Ashi. Amemar says the idolater acquires it by pulling it towards him through Mashicha, and Amemar says, and Rav Ashi says he does not acquire it through Mashicha. So the Gemara says, Meisvei, let's raise a contradictory brisa against Amemar. Amemar says that when he pulls it towards him, the idolater pulls it towards him, he's acquire it. So the contradictory brisa is, let's say the Jew is purchasing pieces of metal, precious metal from the idolater, and he finds like some idols amongst them. If he has not yet given the money, and then mashach, but he still pulled it towards him, yachzir, he can return it. But if after he gave the money, he pulled it towards him, he has to throw it away. So we see from here that what's the determining point in acquisition? It's not the pulling it towards him, but it's the giving him the money. So this is a question on a Meimer. If you say that pulling it towards you acquires it, why can he give it back in the first clause where he has not given the money? He's pulled it towards him. So Amar Abaye says, Mishum, no, that case he can do it. Either maybe we take in or take out that word. That case is a mistaken sale. He didn't think he was buying the wine. He didn't think he was buying the idol. He thought he was just buying gold and silver or precious metals. And so he showed up with an idol. He says, this is a bad deal. So the Gemara says, so therefore it's not the deal. So therefore he could return it. It was a mistaken transaction. So that Rava says, Reisha mekachtos. Well, if the first case is a mekachtos, seifulav mekachtos, also the latter case where we say it's irreversible. There also, he also wasn't trying to buy the idols. And there in that case, he say once he gave the money, then it's irreversible. Seifulav ella. So therefore, we have to say it's a different scenario. Amarava reisha v'seifa mekachtos. They're both where it was a mistaken scenario. But in the first clause, we say it's reversible because since he didn't give the money, it doesn't look like he got the money of the idolatry of the idols in the hands of the Jew. Because meaning, say in the first case, if he then would go and take back the money. In the latter case, Seifa, the Yav Zuzi, in the latter case, he gave the money. Looks like you have the idols in the hands of the Jew. Rashi explains that when he goes and gives the money, it looks like he's basically selling the idols to the idolaters, basically, or he's purchasing the mezabin avodas kochavim demei. That he's basically, in that case, giving the money to the idolater, and if the idolater wants to take it back, then it looks like he's selling it to him, and so it's a big problem. It looks like he's trading in idolatry. So that's the issue. So the Gemara, therefore, is still trying to determine if the law is like Hamimah, it says that Meshicha ben idolater requires it. So Amrei Markashisha Brei Derav. So Markashisha Brei Derav Chisda says to Rav Ashi, again, Rav Ashi says the Meshicha does not acquire it. Let's bring a proof from our Mishnah. That if you sell your wine to the idolatry, to the idols, and you make a price before you measured it out, then you can, then it's permitted. So again, what does our Mishnah say? You sell the wine to the idolater, Pasach, you agreed upon a price before he measured it out, then it's permitted. We see from here, and if you want to say that Meshicha does not acquire it, Amai Dam of Mutarin, then why in this case is the money permitted? Amai Dam of Mutarin, why in this case the idolater has not yet acquired it, and so therefore when he goes and measures it out, it's become a yayin nesach in the hands of the Jew, and then he pulls it towards him. And so under those circumstances, the Jew is selling him the yayin nesach. So the moment of the kinyan, it's already not yayin nesach. So Gemara says, no, hachav and mayaskinon. Now what's the case? Why that's permitted is the iktim dinar. He paid for him in advance, even before he took it. So that was the kinyan, and so therefore it's permitted. Well, but if that's the case, how do we make that work with the including clause? Madad achla pasak. But let's say he measured it out before he agreed upon the price. Asurim. Then we're going to say it's prohibited. So if he measured it out before he agreed upon the price, it's prohibited. But if according to you he already paid in advance, why is it prohibited under those circumstances? They already paid. So Rav Ashi responds to Markashisha. He says, according to you, you want to defend the member. You say Damas Mashiach, you also have a problem. Amai Reisha Dama Mutaran. Why in the first case is the money permitted? V'seifa Dama Vasurin, and in the latter case is the money prohibited. How are you going to explain it? I mean, how do you explain the distinction between the two cases? Or what must you say? Pasak, that if they agreed upon a price, Stam Chadaite, that means that he intends to acquire it. Well, Pasak or Stam Chadaite, that once they agreed upon a price, that they agreed to acquire it with Meshicha. But if they don't agree upon the price, then they haven't agreed upon it. So the dinami, I also say Avagav the Kadam dinar. I also say even though he pays him in advance, Pasak Samchadaita or Pasak or Samchadaita. He only acquires it if it's not just enough to do the action. You need smichos das. You need to also have consent. And so it's not just enough to according to you, to pull it. You need to have consent. And according to me, it's not just enough to pay the money. There needs to be agreement on the price. So it's not a proof from our Mishnah. So I'm only Ravina or Rav Ashi. So Ravina says, I'll prove to you, Rav Ashi, that you're wrong. Rav Ashi says Meshicha does not acquire by an idolater. Tashma, Amar B'chia Bar Abba, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. So this is a case from an Amora, from Rabbi Yochanan. Ben Noach, but he's basically... so the Gemara says that Rabbi Chia Bar Abba says that Rabbi Yochanan taught Ben Noach, an idolater, Neraga Pachas Mishava Pruta, is going to be killed even if they steal less than a Pruta. V'loni Tali Shavon, and he can't pay it back. He's killed because he stole less than a Shava Pruta, and even though the Jew does not see it as money, and he would waive it because it's less than a pruta, still the idolater views it as money, and he's stealing it. And so therefore, we're going to put the idolater to death, and he can't pay it back. If you're going to say that just by pulling it, he hasn't acquired it, why is he killed? What has he done? He's done nothing. He hasn't pulled it towards him. He hasn't acquired it. So why is he killed? So the Gemara says, Mishum Tsara di Israel. He's killed not because of the theft, but because of the pain he killed the Jew. That's how Rav Ashi would respond. So Gemara says, "My lo nitain lishavon." So if that's the case, what does it mean lo nitain lishavon? And what does it mean it cannot be paid back? The eno b'toras lishavon, meaning to say that since he hasn't acquired it, therefore it cannot be paid back at all because it's not within the rubric. It's not that he can't pay it back. He didn't acquire it. So that's not under the rubric of paying it back. The Gemara says you can't read it that way. Ema Sefer, the next clause says, if another idolater comes with not menu and he takes it from him, Nera go out. Then we're going to kill the second idolater. Bishlam Aresha, we're killing the first person, even though we didn't actually take it according to you. Mishum Tsara Yisrael, because he's caused pain. Ela Seifa, my Avid. Why are we killing him in the latter cause? Only because of theft. We wouldn't kill him because he caused pain to the other idolater. So we see from you, Rabbi, we see from here, from Rabbi Yochanan's ruling, the Meshicha ben idolater has acquired it, Shema Mina. And that's how the Gemara concludes that idolater can acquire through Meshicha. Actually, there's a lot of ways when we do a kinyan with a non-Jew to transfer the chametz. We do a lot of different ways because there's a dispute about how the different methods of acquisition. Here, the final conclusion is brought from a proof from Rabbi Yochanan, who's an Amora. Usually, it would bring it between a machlokas amongst the Amoraim. You would have to bring a proof not from another Amora, but from a Tana. But here it's from an Amora. We'll stop here. Shekayach.